So here I am with my friend who I just recently met, and we started to get acquainted, and I learned that we had some very similar experiences about where we came from. And part of that was being into the, the dark worlds of, the occult and witchcraft specifically. And my hope was for us to have opportunity to talk about that and for you to be able to listen. So here we are. So for me, I can start off just like a little bit where I came from. Like I was telling you before, some people get really deep into witchcraft and start practicing and leading others and all of that sort of stuff. There was a brother um, who talked about it, and he used to be like a high priest in all that stuff in like either just some satanic something or other. And he talked about how there's different categories: people who like dabble, people who practice, and people who get even deeper than that. And for me, it was sort of just like I dabbled a little bit in it in like a youthful innocence, because my parents had given me that book about how to be a wizard, and it taught you how to practice divination and use pendulums and stuff, and just very basic things. But I actually did that, so I can say that I did come from a past of like practicing witchcraft, and even if it was in a small sense, but in a much deeper sense, like I was deep into Dungeons and Dragons and deep into the card game Magic the Gathering and other, one of the video games I played was actually named, like, called Diablo, and all about
Heard of that.
just,
Yeah.
and it's just, so like even though that particular practice, like what people might consider that practice, being a practitioner of witchcraft was a small portion of my past, that idolatry of like really lifting up that dark element and pretending to cast spells in role-playing games or video games, or the very game Magic the Gathering is about taking upon the role of a wizard or warlock or planeswalker magic user basically, and casting spells. So I mean, one of the very card types in the game is called a sorcery, and it's very it's very there's very dark elements to it. So, but your experience was a bit different, and I'd like to learn again more of like how it all started.
Yeah, like kind of what drew me to witchcraft. Well, I think what draws a lot of people to the craft is a sense of control. For me, my childhood was fairly abusive, and there were a lot of things. I had a lot of anger and a lot of things that I just felt like, man, I can't control anything in my life. And I watched a movie called The Craft, and in that movie, I was introduced to genetic witchcraft. So witches believe that there's kind of like two types of witches. There's like a witch that you learn to cast spells and things, but then you might have been born a witch where you have some natural power. Now, the reason that I saw that, not the reason I saw the movie, but the reason that I thought I may have been, was both my grandmother and my mother kind of had some supernatural experiences. And then I started having experiences before I ever actually got interested in the craft. And I thought, this could be me, because it makes you feel special.
Yeah.
And it's like, and in that movie, these teenagers in high school have the power to change the circumstances of things that are going on in their lives. And I thought, I want that.
How old
were
you?
I was 14.
Yeah, and that's the very age when you want power, you want control, and you're desperate for being able to influence your surroundings.
Yeah. And I was always a very shy person, and just kind of awkward, and I don't know, I think you're almost more drawn to that when you're that way.
Yeah.
I don't know, but anyway, that's what got me started in it. And at first I just kind of dabbled, like you kind of like pretend spell casting, and then it was a friend of my mother's that actually got me like a book. I think it was called Season of the Witch or something, and it talked about going through like the year of celebrating the pagan holidays. And that's really what got me started. And So I was into witchcraft let's see, I was 14, and I did it until I was 26. So casting spells, reading tarot cards for money, messing with people's lives, and it made me feel powerful because you could see things being influenced in a direction that you wanted. But yet at the same time, here I was supposedly so powerful, and yet I was miserable. So, like, it had a lot of depression and anxiety and things that went with it that people don't often talk about, because you just kind of pretend to be. It's like, well, you're getting the things you want, and yet you're not any happier for it. Yeah.
So, when you talk about spellcasting and these special times that in the culture of witchcraft were these appointed times, these pagan, you called them pagan holidays, I'm reminded of both prayer and how the laying on of hands, casting out devils, and those things that we hear about in the Bible, and also the times that God appointed throughout the year. Like, you see that there's like Passover and the Feast of Tabernacles and things like that. And I noticed that there's an interesting parallel there. And it seems that what God has done, it seems like there's almost an attempt to imitate that or distort that and twist that up. And I'm wondering, like, what that, like, did you see that, or what are your thoughts on that now, thinking about it?
Yeah, there's definitely anything good and wonderful that God has put in our lives, Satan twists and distorts and pulls you away from, or makes it, it confuses you so much about it that you're like, okay, I don't even want to try to deal with it then, because you don't know. And the holidays and things, I didn't notice so much of that at the time as I do looking back on it. But at the time, I noticed that, like, a lot of the natural things that God has meant for us to be good and healing in our body, Satan takes and twists and distorts and almost makes people afraid of it, like, using herbs and essential oils and these things that are meant for good. He takes it and makes it for evil.
Well,
and then when people come out of it, they're almost so scared to death to use it because it seems evil to them that you have to. That's really where discernment comes in.
Yes, I think there is a line there, because it's very interesting that the word that's translated sorcery in the King James Version comes from the Greek word pharmakia, and that is where we get the words pharmacy and pharmaceutical, pharmacist, and there really is nothing new under the sun. I mean, hundreds of years ago, people had their mortar and pestle, and they took herbs and different substances, and they crushed those and administered those in what they'd call potions or this or that. And these days, you just have professional sorcerers in their labs, like, fabricating things.
Yeah.
And while there's a lot to be said about pharmaceutical drugs and things like that, I think I'll leave that for another subject.
I was going to say, that would be a whole nother video, brother.
Yes. There are life-giving and healing herbs that exist that I can imagine coming from witchcraft. People might be hesitant to continue and to use those things, which actually are, God created to be, for the healing of the nations. He created these things for us to utilize to His glory. So it is very interesting that I wholeheartedly agree with that there. So, was there a social component of your practice in the craft, as you call it?
No, it's more like an antisocial component.
Really?
Yeah. It was more like, well, I'm already shy and awkward, so let's just make myself more
weird.
I don't like the word weird. Well, actually, I do like the word weird, but it's more like mysterious.
Well, interestingly, the word weird actually has if you look at the etymology, it comes, and the reason I use that word is very deliberate, because it has specifically to do with witchcraft.
Does it really?
Yes.
What does that mean?
It just, if you look at the etymology, like where the word comes from, like that I can't break it down exactly for you, but like it's that weird that part of the word, if it traces right back to like those same words for witchcraft and
Oh,
things like
really?
that.
Okay, well then maybe I was trying to be weird.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, but
It's
it was.
the way it's used has changed over the years, but
Oh, okay.
that's its history,
Hmm.
which is interesting.
That is interesting. I didn't know that.
So so for you it was an antisocial component. I imagine some other witches they come together for their holidays, their like they might call them Sabbaths, right?
Yeah.
Yeah,
Black
which is
Sabbath,
interesting. Yeah. So another component that comes along with witchcraft is when you practice the it just fascinates me that you call it the craft, because it just really reveals like that you were part of it, like it just like that vocabulary just really resonates, a familiarity with that world. So but those who dabble in those things or practice those things, they've really chosen to open a door.
Yes.
And I'd like to hear about, and I can share some of my experiences as well, if if you'd like, and just what came through that door.
Well, you know, at first I didn't really think about the opening the door part of it. You just want, like I said, to feel powerful, but then the farther you get into it, and you know that you're messing with something dark, but you think it's cool. You know, it doesn't occur to you that the darkness is bad because,
It's alluring.
yeah, and also, you know, there are witches that are deliberately satanic and they believe in that, but then there are witches that don't believe in God or Satan or good or evil, you know.
I
There's
imagine it's just as diverse as
right.
the different denominations
Yeah.
and ways people practice Christianity.
So the where I was looking at it, there wasn't good or bad. Those were more like things that's it's just kind of in the eye of the beholder,
Sure.
you know? So it didn't really occur to me that there were dark forces behind it. It was more like you're unlocking a power that's within you rather than getting power from an outside source. Because I didn't believe in Satan. So, you know,
Sure.
to me, Satan was a little guy with red horns and a tail and like fairy tale. So it never occurred to me that there was anything going on like that. But as I got farther in, I did definitely believe that you could speak to the deceased. So I thought that was really cool, and I did spend a lot of my time trying to contact dead relatives or just anybody. You know, I'm sure like anybody under a certain age that's listening to the Doors or whatever, you're like, let's see if we can contact Tim Morrison or something, you know, just something stupid.
Sure.
And so, you know, I would sit at night and like try to have these seances and things. And I can't say that I ever made contact with anything in that way. Like, it wasn't like I was awake and there was like a manifestation or something in my room or in our house or anything like that. But there were a few things that did happen. So in the seances, after, like I said, nothing happened during them. And then I would go to sleep and I would take a tape recorder and I would lay it at the side of my bed. And then I would have it recording for, you know, however long they went. And then, not all the time, but sometimes when I would play it back, there would be like demonic sounding voices on the tape. But now I look back on it and go, of course they were demonic sounding. But in doing it, it's like it didn't even occur to me that these were like evil sounding voices, and it just makes me wonder, like, what was wrong with you?
Were you pleased to hear something?
Yeah, because I'm like, I'm making progress, you know? And like I said, there's just kind of a delusional kind of thing, for me anyway, that came with it, like kind of a denial. But, and it happened almost, I can't say I know for sure, like I can't pinpoint what age I was when it started, but I know it was very early on that I started having sleep paralysis. And
could you explain what that is?
yeah, sleep paralysis is when you wake up and you're aware that you're awake, but you can't move your body. And sometimes you get the sensation of like pressure on your chest, like you can't breathe. And I would wake up with it and I would not be able to move. And I would just see this black mass hovering above my bed. And this happened the entire time I practiced. So from very early on when I started clear through, like I said, I think I was 26 when I quit, and that happened the entire time. And that was frightening. And I would almost convince myself that it didn't happen, like that I didn't see those things. And we moved quite a lot, and it didn't matter what house we were in or anything. It constantly happened. It was very consistent. And it wasn't until I came that God delivered me from all of this that I've talked to other people who had dealings in the occult, and they had very similar experiences. And I don't know for sure, but I honestly think that it was a demon trying to possess me. And the only thing I believe that kept me from it was God's hand. I think he was protecting me. I think he knew at some point I was going to give my heart to him, so he's like, you can't have her, but...
So is the whole black cat witchcraft ring true?
I don't really know. There are familiars.
Yeah.
And I've always been fond of black cats. I actually still have a black cat, but it never was really like a witchcraft thing. I have heard that there are witches that sacrifice black cats. But I never got into like the dark scariness, because like I said, that's a little more of the satanic side.
Yeah.
Where I was more of like, I'm a white witch. So. Yeah.
Well, I want to touch on that, what you mentioned about contacting the dead, because I understand that you've been, like in the past years, you've had quite a transition, and you've been a student of the Bible and been studying what the Bible teaches. So has your opinion changed about who it was you were trying to reach or were reaching?
Oh, well, I know now that the dead know nothing. So it was dark angels, these fallen demonic angels that you're contacting. And like I said, I thank God that it wasn't so much worse than it, because it could have gotten really bad. I mean, I have heard horror stories about people who went into full-blown possession, or, demons, like, because there's a difference between being possessed and oppressed, like demons attaching themselves to a person. And, well, actually, I take that back, because last year I met a couple who were very versed in spiritual warfare. And we had known them for a little while, and he pulled me to the side and he said, "Can I talk to you about something?" And I was like, "Sure." And he said, "I remember you saying that you practiced the occult for a while." And I said, "Yeah." And he said, "You get really bad headaches." And I said, "Yeah, they're pretty frequent." And he said, "Do you know a lot of people that come out of the occult actually have trouble with migraines afterward, and that's part of being demonically oppressed?" And I was like, "No, I had no idea." So he said, "Well, if you're willing, would you like to have prayer and see if we can cast this away from you, if that's what it is?" And I was like, "Yeah, let's go for that." So he did that, and the headaches that I was having, they stopped after that. So it's interesting because, it's really hard. You don't get out of the occult clean. There's stuff that just tries to stick with you, whether it be, I don't know that everyone that comes out of the occult has a demon oppressing them or anything, but there's like these memories and things that are just always there. And, or like if you start talking about it, you'll start remembering more of it, which I don't really like to do. I don't like to talk about it too much, because some of the stuff I did was just awful. The like messing with people's lives and things. It's just terrible.
Well, there are two other things I can think of to ask you about, and the first one is, what words of encouragement or what words would you have to say to someone who is either considering practicing witchcraft, or is in that midst of it right now. They're making in the midst of a decision. How would you comfort, encourage them? What counsel would you have for them? Uh, what should they do?
Yeah, what should you do? Well, with witchcraft, you're tempted, even though you see these things happening around you, and like I said, you feel like you're powerful, and yet more than likely you're not happy. You tend to want to try to go deeper into witchcraft. And I think I would just say that that's not the answer. Like, you're never going to deepen that hole to get out of it. It's just going to get so much worse. And you have to give your heart to Christ. And if you are oppressed or, possessed, that there's hope for you. They can be cast out. And if you fill that void with Christ, there's nothing that he can't heal or bring you through. And you're not too far gone.
Amen.
Yeah.
And I think my final question, before I ask it, I wanted to comment that I really noticed that in many of these paths that are not towards Christ, it is all about how can I increase? How can I increase myself? How can I be more powerful, more exalted, more mighty? Whereas if we remember the words of John the Baptist, he said that I must decrease and that he must increase, that Christ must increase, that we can behold the Lamb that taketh away the sin of the world, and that we can endeavor to become smaller and smaller so that Christ is larger and larger and more increased in our experience.
Yeah.
So I find that no testimony, no story is complete if all you do is focus on where you came from. Because who you were is not nearly as important as who you are and who you are becoming. So who are you now and where are you going?
Well, now I realize that my father is a king, and I'm his daughter, because it took me a little bit to realize I wasn't a servant, that I was his child. There's a big difference in that. And because when you're in the occult, you don't realize it, but you're serving Satan. That's what you're doing. So you kind of try to flip the mindset from just one to the other, and there's just so much joy in being a child of God that's never found in the occult. And as to where I'm going, well, Jesus is coming soon, my friend, so I'm going home. So oh, one more thing about if you're trying to come out of the occult. When you go to get rid of your stuff, your spell books, your cards, whatever it is, burn it. Don't give it to somebody. Don't pile it in a box and throw it in your attic. Just burn it. Just destroy it. Doesn't matter how much money you paid for it or whatever. Just destroy it. Because that's, I really think that that's sending a message to the devil. Like, I'm not yours anymore. So that's very important. Can I ask you a question?
Well, I think what we will do is conclude here and do a part 2 where you can ask me all the questions you like.
Okay, cool.
All right. So, thank you for watching, and we pray that if you are practicing, or if you know someone, that you can seek Christ and you can come to him, and he is willing to forgive. He will abundantly pardon. Though our sins be as scarlet, he can make us as white as the snow. So, thank you for watching, and shalom, my friends.